In classical Ayurveda, every physician faces the same physical problem. The three core physiological forces, Vāta, Pitta, and Kapha, are formless and invisible. Because a physician cannot physically hold or see a dosha, a traditional structural diagnosis is impossible. You cannot directly measure what you cannot see. The solution relies on the principle of guna guninora bedopachara. This establishes a non-difference between a guna, an observable attribute, and the gunin, the actual entity. If an entity is entirely defined by its physical attributes, then identifying those exact attributes in a patient, like isolated heat, acute dryness, or dense weight, is identical to diagnosing the invisible force itself. To treat the invisible safely, the physician requires a precise, mathematically restricted system of observable parameters. To prevent diagnostic drift, Chapter 1 of the Ashtanga Hridaya Sutrasthana forcibly restricts the properties of each dosha to exact numerical counts. Vāta is confined to 6 defining attributes, Pitta to 7, and Kapha to 7. These restricted counts provide a universal standard for practitioners. Every complex pathology, regardless of its presentation, must be reduced back to these 20 specific variables. The classical commentator Arunata used deep grammatical analysis to reveal the clinical mechanics behind these brief Sanskrit verses. These ancient lists function as diagnostic algorithms, providing the specific parameters a physician must use to identify a dosha through its actions. The text begins with Vāta, outlining its 6 parameters: dry, light, cold, rough, subtle, and mobile. The commentary emphasizes the word tatra, or specification, to isolate Vāta from its counterparts, marking ruksha, dryness, as its foundational trait. Philosophers raise an objection. In universal physics, the element of air is thermally neutral. However, Vāta acts as a catalyst. It adopts the temperature of whatever it associates with, becoming hot when paired with Pitta and cold with Kapha. If Vāta is elementally neutral and acts as a chameleon inside the body, why does the medical text lock it into the Shita, or cold, slot in its matrix? Arunata provides the resolution. Underneath any borrowed heat from its environment, Vāta's inherent nature remains cold. Vagbhata overrides elemental physics for a clinical purpose. He forces the physician to recognize that all Vāta pathologies must be pacified by Ushna, or warming therapies. The matrix then shifts to Pitta, locking its physiological parameters to 7 attributes, starting with the anchor term, sasneha. The prefix sa is translated by the commentators to mean ishat. This dictates that Pitta possesses only a slight residual oiliness. If biological fire were completely dry, its intense heat would burn through the tissues housing it. Conversely, heavy unctuousness would smother the metabolic fire. That slight oiliness acts as a liquid fuel base, sustaining the fire without destroying its container. When Pitta moves, it does so through its tikshna quality. It acts with immense speed, piercing tissues sharply like a needle to cause acute inflammation. To track this fire, the physician relies on the marker visra. The commentary defines this as the raw, foul odor of uncooked fish, offering a sensory diagnostic for Pitta dominance in bodily secretions. Pitta is a fast, pervasive force that relies on a delicate, slightly oily medium to prevent its own self-destruction. Finally, the text details Kapha's 7 attributes, anchored by snigdha, denoting profound unctuousness. Kapha acts as the mechanical inverse to Vāta. It replaces dry, light movement with dense, heavy, and cold stability. Its temporal nature is defined by manda, or slow acting. Because Kapha is the opposite of Pitta's sharp speed, Kapha diseases take a long time to manifest and a long time to cure. The most tactile diagnostic attribute in the text is mritsna. The commentator provides a physical instruction for this term. Mritsna is slimy and shiny. When physically rubbed between a physician's fingertips, it will slowly stretch, web apart, and stubbornly adhere to the skin. Observing this specific stringiness and sheen in a patient's secretions confirms the presence of morbid kapha. The doshas remain formless, but the classical commentators mapped them to such precise physical markers that they become impossible for a trained physician to miss. Bringing these isolated matrices together shows how the 20 distinct attributes interact to build a geometric web of homeostasis. Identifying a dosha today remains an exercise in biomaterial analysis. Pitta's viscera attribute is defined by the foul, raw odor of uncooked fish. This physical reality aligns with the modern detection of specific volatile organic compounds in sweat or breath, chemical markers that signal hypermetabolic states. Kapha's mritsna and snigdha qualities describe physical stickiness and unctuousness. These tactile descriptions find their parallel in the measurement of viscoelastic properties, how fluids like mucosal secretions or joint fluids stretch and resist flow. By isolating Vāta's cold nature, Shitta, regardless of its association with heat, clinical logic dictates that the underlying pathology must be countered with vasodilation and warming therapies. The vocabulary has evolved, but the underlying physical realities isolated by Ayurveda remain the standard of physiological behavior. These matrices apply outside the clinic. By observing shifts in the gunas, like increased dryness in the skin or sudden sharpness in digestion, a person can intercept disease before it forms. Preemptively deploying opposing qualities through diet and lifestyle neutralizes the pathology before it reaches the deeper tissues. This brings us back to the principle of guna guninor abedo patala. Vagpata's grid of 20 attributes serves as the practical bridge between abstract physiological forces and their tangible physical effects. In classical Ayurveda, a physician never actually treats the invisible dosha. They master, manipulate, and conquer the tangible guna.